The sun hung low over the vast Arizona territory, painting the desert in shades of amber and gold as Margaret, Maggie, Sullivan clutched her father's old pocket watch, her knuckles white with determination. The stagecoach had abandoned her at Whispering Creek, a town barely visible on any map, with nothing but 2 valises containing her worldly possessions and a letter offering employment as the town's new schoolteacher. The year was 1878, and at 22, Maggie had left behind the comforts of Boston to forge her own path after the devastating loss of her parents to influenza. "Madam, you planning on standing there till sundown?" The gruff voice startled her from her thoughts. Maggie turned to face a weathered man with salt and pepper hair. "I'm looking for the schoolhouse. I'm the new teacher." The man's eyebrows shot up. "Teacher, eh? Town's been waiting on you. Name's Walter Jenkins, own the general store." He gestured down the dusty main street. "Schoolhouse is at the far end, but Mrs. Abernathy's boarding house is where you'll be staying. Let me help with those bags." Before Maggie could protest, her bags were whisked away. She followed Walter, taking in the town a collection of wooden buildings with false fronts, horses hitched to posts, and curious eyes following her progress. Whispering Creek was a far cry from Boston's cobblestone streets. Mrs. Abernathy's boarding house was a 2-story structure with a wide porch and curtained windows. The proprietress herself, a round woman with kind eyes, greeted Maggie effusively. "My stars, you've arrived. We weren't sure you'd come after hearing about what happened to the last teacher." At Maggie's alarmed expression, Mrs. Abernathy waved dismissively. "Oh, nothing sinister, dear. She just up and married a cattle baron from Texas after only 3 months." Maggie let out a relieved laugh. "I assure you, Mrs. Abernathy, I didn't come west seeking a husband." "That's what they all say," Walter chuckled, depositing her bags in the entryway. "Welcome to Whispering Creek, Miss Sullivan." That evening, after a hearty meal with the boarding house's other residents, an elderly widower who worked at the bank and 2 sisters who ran the town's dressmaking shop, Maggie stood on the porch, gazing at the stars that seemed impossibly bright compared to Boston's night sky. "First night in the West?" a deep voice asked. Maggie turned to find a tall figure approaching from the shadows. As he stepped into the light spilling from the window, she saw a man perhaps a few years older than herself, with broad shoulders, sun-bronzed skin, and eyes the color of a stormy sky. His dark hair was slightly too long, and a hint of stubble shadowed his jawline. "Is it that obvious?" she asked, suddenly conscious of her proper Eastern attire. "You have that look about you. Like everything's new." He climbed the steps, respectfully keeping his distance. "Owen Blackwood. I ranch outside town." "Margaret Sullivan," she replied, offering her hand as propriety dictated. "They'll most call me Maggie." He removed his hat and took her hand with surprising gentleness for a man whose calluses spoke of hard labor. "The new schoolteacher, I presume. Word travels fast." In Whispering Creek, a whisper at dawn is shouted from rooftops by noon. His mouth curved into a smile that transformed his rugged features. "My sister's children will be in your class. Alice is 8, James is 10. I look forward to meeting them," Maggie said, finding herself charmed despite her determination to remain professional. "They're good kids. Smart, too." Owen placed his hat back on. "I should let you rest. You've had a long journey." As he turned to leave, Maggie found herself calling after him. "Mr. Blackwood? What should I know about Whispering Creek that no one's telling me?" Owen paused, considering her question. "This town needs someone who won't give up on it, Miss Sullivan. Too many have come and gone." His eyes met hers with unexpected intensity. "Good night." Maggie watched him disappear into the darkness, his words echoing in her mind. She'd come west for a fresh start, not expecting to find herself already intrigued by a rancher with perceptive eyes and a challenge in his voice. The schoolhouse was a simple 1-room building with rows of benches, a potbelly stove in the corner, and a teacher's desk on a raised platform. Maggie arrived early her first morning, determined to make a good impression. She had spent hours preparing lessons for students whose ages and educational backgrounds were largely unknown to her. By 8 o'clock, children began filtering in, some neat and well-dressed, others with patches on their clothes, but all scrubbed clean for the occasion. Among them were 2 children with the same stormy eyes as Owen Blackwood. Alice, the girl, approached Maggie's desk with purpose. "Are you really from Boston?" she asked without preamble. I am, Maggie confirmed with a smile. Uncle Owen says Boston ladies wear fancy dresses and talk like they're reading from books. Maggie bit back a laugh. Does he now? And what do you think? Alice scrutinized her. You talk nice, but your dress isn't as fancy as I expected. Alice. Her brother, James, looked mortified. I'm sorry, Miss Sullivan. My sister doesn't have manners yet. It's quite all right, James. Honest observations are valuable. Maggie knelt to Alice's level. I left my fanciest dresses in Boston. They wouldn't be very practical for teaching, would they? By mid-morning, Maggie had assessed her 23 students, ranging from 6 to 16 years old. Some could barely write their names while others were ready for advanced arithmetic. The challenge was invigorating. At noon, the children scattered for lunch. Maggie unwrapped the sandwich Mrs. Abernathy had packed for her and stepped outside to enjoy the fresh air. She found Owen Blackwood leaning against a hitching post, his horse grazing nearby. Mr. Blackwood, she acknowledged, surprised to see him. Miss Sullivan. He pushed off the post. Thought I'd see how the first day was progressing. Checking up on the Eastern schoolteacher? She asked with a raised eyebrow. Something like that. He glanced toward the schoolhouse. Alice and James have been talking about nothing else for weeks. They're wonderful children. You must be proud. A shadow crossed Owen's face. Their father, my brother, would be. He and his wife died 3 years ago. Influenza. Maggie's heart constricted. I'm sorry. My parents were taken by the same. Their eyes met in shared understanding. It's not easy raising them alone, Owen admitted. The ranch keeps me busy, and they need more than I can give sometimes. Education is a gift no one can take away, Maggie said softly. I'll do my best by them. Owen studied her for a long moment. I believe you will, Miss Sullivan. He mounted his horse with fluid grace. Welcome to Whispering Creek. As weeks passed, Maggie settled into the rhythm of Western life. Her students proved eager to learn, though disciplining boys more accustomed to ranch work than reading posed unique challenges. She found unexpected joy in teaching children whose lives were so different from her own privileged upbringing. Owen Blackwood became a regular presence, arriving to collect Alice and James 3 days a week when his ranch work permitted. On other days, they stayed with Mrs. Abernathy until he could send one of his ranch hands. These brief encounters became moments Maggie found herself anticipating. One Friday afternoon in October, Maggie was erasing the chalkboard when Alice announced, Uncle Owen says you should come for Sunday dinner. Maggie turned, startled. Does he now? He said to ask proper, James added quickly. He says it's the right way to do things. Before Maggie could respond, Owen appeared in the doorway, hat in hand. I see my niece has no concept of patience. His expression was a mixture of amusement and embarrassment. What my messengers meant to convey, Miss Sullivan, is that we'd be honored if you'd join us for Sunday dinner at the ranch. Maggie felt her cheeks warm. I wouldn't want to impose. You wouldn't be, Owen assured her. The children have been pestering me about it for weeks. And I. He hesitated. I'd like to show you that we're not all uncultured cowboys out here. His self-deprecating smile decided her. Then I accept. Thank you. Sunday arrived clear and crisp. Walter Jenkins offered his wagon to transport Maggie to the Blackwood Ranch, situated 6 miles outside town. As they crested a hill, the property came into view, a substantial log house with a wide porch, several outbuildings, and corrals filled with horses. Behind stretched acres of grazing land reaching to distant mountains. Impressive, isn't it? Walter commented. Owen's father started with nothing. Now the Blackwood Ranch is one of the most successful in the territory. Owen doubled its size after taking over. He seems very dedicated, Maggie observed. That he is. Works harder than any man I know. Walter glanced at her. Good man, too. Took in his brother's children without hesitation when the tragedy struck. They pulled up to the house just as Owen emerged from the barn. He wore clean clothes instead of his usual work attire, and his hair was neatly combed. Maggie felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with the bumpy wagon ride. Right on time, Owen called, approaching to help her down. His hand was warm and steady around her waist as she descended. Thank you for bringing her, Walter. My pleasure. Mrs. Abernathy made me promise to have her back before dark, Walter replied with a knowing smile that made Maggie blush. I'll ensure she returns safely, Owen promised, and something in his tone made Maggie glance up sharply. His expression was unreadable as Walter turned his wagon around and departed. The inside of the ranch house surprised Maggie. While rustic, it was comfortable and clean, with handcrafted furniture and colorful quilts. Books lined one wall, evidence of a family that valued reading. Alice and James proudly showed her around, pointing out their rooms and favorite hiding spots. Their housekeeper, Mrs. Diaz, had prepared a feast. Maggie learned she was a widow whose husband had worked for Owen's father. After his death, Owen had insisted she and her son Miguel remain. Miguel, now 17, worked as Owen's right hand on the ranch. Miss Sullivan was telling us about the ocean yesterday, James announced as they sat down to eat. She's seen whales. Only from a distance, Maggie clarified. But they're magnificent creatures. Bigger than cattle? Alice asked. Much bigger. Some are larger than this house. The meal progressed with easy conversation. Owen spoke of ranch matters with knowledge and passion. He asked thoughtful questions about Boston and her teaching methods. By dessert, a delicious apple pie, Maggie felt completely at ease. After the meal, while the children helped Mrs. Diaz clear the table, Owen invited Maggie to see the rest of the property. They walked together, maintaining a respectable distance as he showed her the barn, the spring house, and finally led her to a ridge overlooking the valley. It's beautiful, Maggie breathed, taking in the panoramic view. You must never tire of this. I don't. Owen agreed, watching her rather than the landscape. It's in my blood now. I couldn't imagine living anywhere else. Your brother's children are fortunate to have this place. And you. Maggie turned to face him. You've given them stability when they needed it most. Owen's expression softened. They're all I have left of Daniel. He was always the better man, smarter, kinder. I'm just trying to honor his memory. I think you underestimate yourself, Mr. Blackwood. Owen, he corrected gently. Out here, formality seems unnecessary, doesn't it? Owen, she repeated, liking the way his name felt. Then you must call me Maggie. A comfortable silence settled between them as they watched the sun begin its descent. Why did you come west, Maggie? He asked finally. Most Eastern ladies wouldn't dream of it. She considered her answer carefully. After my parents died, Boston felt suffocating. Every street, every room held memories. I needed somewhere different, somewhere I could be useful. She paused. And perhaps I wanted adventure. And have you found it? I'm beginning to think I have. Their eyes met, and Maggie felt something shift between them, a recognition, a possibility. The moment was broken by Alice calling from the house. Uncle Owen. Miss Sullivan. Mrs. Diaz says it's getting late. Owen smiled ruefully. Duty calls. We should head back. As promised, Owen personally drove Maggie back to town in the family buggy, with Alice and James insisting on coming along. The children chattered most of the way, but as they approached town, they dozed off against each other in the back seat. Thank you for today, Maggie said softly. It was wonderful. The pleasure was ours, Owen replied, his voice equally quiet. You've made quite an impression on them. They've made one on me as well. She hesitated. And their uncle has too. In the dim light, she saw his hands tighten on the reins. Maggie, I should tell you I'm not good at pretty words or courtship. My life is the ranch and these children. I haven't asked for pretty words, Owen. No, you haven't. He sighed. But a woman like you deserves them. They arrived at the boarding house too soon. Owen helped her down, his touch lingering longer than necessary. Good night, Maggie Sullivan. Good night, Owen Blackwood. She ascended the steps, turning back once to find him watching her, his expression unguarded in the moonlight. As autumn progressed, Maggie found herself increasingly integrated into Whispering Creek's community. She organized a harvest festival at the schoolhouse, helped establish a small lending library, and even convinced the town council to purchase new textbooks. Her evenings were spent grading papers, preparing lessons, and writing long letters to her aunt in Boston, letters that mentioned Owen Blackwood with increasing frequency. Their encounters remained largely public, brief conversations when he collected the children, occasional meetings at church or town gatherings. Yet each interaction deepened her understanding of this complex man who shouldered such responsibilities. In mid-November, disaster struck. A fierce storm swept through, causing the creek to overflow and flood the schoolhouse. Maggie arrived to find books floating in muddy water, desks overturned, and the potbelly stove knocked over. No, no, no. she whispered, wading into the mess, desperately trying to salvage what she could. Hours later, soaked and mud-streaked, she sat on the schoolhouse steps surrounded by sodden books, fighting tears of frustration. Maggie. Owen's voice broke through her despair. He dismounted quickly, taking in the scene. The children said there was trouble. Everything's ruined, she managed, gesturing to the building behind her. The books, the slates, even the stove. How can I teach without? She broke off as Owen knelt before her, taking her cold hands in his. This can be fixed, he said firmly. All of it. The town council has no money for repairs. They made that clear when I asked for new textbooks. Owen's jaw tightened. Then we'll find another way. He helped her to her feet. First, you need dry clothes before you catch your death. Come on. He led her to his horse, insisting she ride while he walked alongside to Mrs. Abernathy's. By evening, word of the schoolhouse disaster had spread through town. To Maggie's amazement, people began appearing at the boarding house, farmers, ranchers, shopkeepers offering lumber, labor, and supplies. We'll start tomorrow, Walter Jenkins announced to the gathered crowd. My store will donate nails and paint. My boys will help with the heavy lifting, offered a cattle rancher whose sons attended the school. Owen stood quietly at the back of the room, but Maggie knew without being told that he had orchestrated this response. Their eyes met across the crowded parlor, and his slight nod confirmed her suspicion. For the next week, Whispering Creek united in rebuilding the schoolhouse. Men worked from dawn till dusk repairing floors, replacing damaged walls, and installing a new stove. Women organized a quilting bee to make new curtains and cushions. Even the children helped, cleaning salvageable items and creating new decorations. Owen was there every day, directing the work with quiet authority. Maggie worked alongside everyone, amazed by the community's generosity. On the seventh day, as sunset approached, the schoolhouse stood transformed better than before, with sturdy new shelves, freshly painted walls, and even a small bell tower. There's one more thing, Owen said as the townspeople gathered to admire their work. He nodded to Miguel, who brought forward a crate. Inside were brand new books, readers, arithmetic texts, geography manuals, and more. Maggie stared in disbelief. How? Telegraphed to Tucson, Owen explained. Express delivery. Consider it the Blackwood contribution. Tears filled her eyes. I don't know how to thank you. All of you. You already have, Mrs. Abernathy said warmly. You've brought something special to our town, Miss Sullivan. This is our way of saying we hope you'll stay. That night, as the celebration continued with an impromptu dance in the newly restored schoolhouse, Owen found Maggie standing outside, gazing at the stars. You should be inside enjoying your triumph, he said, joining her. It's not my triumph. It belongs to everyone. She turned to him. Especially you. Owen shook his head. I just help coordinate. These people care about their children's education. About you. Why did you do it, Owen? The books must have cost a fortune. He was quiet for a long moment. When Daniel died, I promised I'd give his children every opportunity he would have. Education was important to him. He paused. And I couldn't bear to see you so heartbroken. The admission hung between them, honest and unadorned. Maggie stepped closer. No one has ever done anything like this for me. Then they weren't paying attention to what you deserve. His voice was rough with emotion. Inside, the fiddle struck up a lively tune. Laughter and the sound of boots on wooden floors filtered out into the night. Would you dance with me, Owen Blackwood? Maggie asked impulsively. His smile was slow and genuine. I'm not much of a dancer, Maggie Sullivan. Neither am I. We can be terrible together. He laughed, then a rich, deep sound she had too rarely heard. Taking her hand, he led her back inside, where they joined the circle of dancers. Owen moved with unexpected grace for a man who claimed no dancing skill. His hand at her waist was respectful but warm, and when their eyes met during a turn, Maggie felt the world narrow to just the two of them. Later, as the gathering dispersed and families headed home under the star-filled sky, Owen walked Maggie back to the boarding house. They moved slowly, neither eager for the evening to end. School reopens tomorrow, Maggie said. Thanks to you and this incredible town. Will you write to your aunt about it? Owen asked. When Maggie looked surprised, he explained. Alice mentioned you write to Boston regularly. Yes, I'll tell her everything. She hesitated. She keeps suggesting I return east. Says I've proven my point about independence. Owen stopped walking. And will you? Return east. The question carried weight beyond its simple words. Maggie met his gaze steadily. My life is here now. I can't imagine leaving. Relief crossed his features, quickly masked. Whispering Creek would be poorer without you. Just Whispering Creek? Owen took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. Maggie, I'm not a man who finds words easily. But know this: what you've brought to this town, to my family. It matters. They had reached the boarding house steps. Propriety dictated they part, but neither moved. Sunday dinner, Owen said suddenly. Will you come again? The children miss you. Just the children? Maggie asked softly. His eyes darkened. No, not just the children. The winter of 1878 proved harsh, with heavy snows isolating Whispering Creek for weeks at a time. School continued when possible, though attendance was sporadic as ranch families struggled with weather-related challenges. Maggie worried especially about the Blackwood Ranch, knowing the season brought additional hardships for cattle operations. During one particularly severe blizzard, school was suspended for over a week. Maggie hadn't seen Owen or the children since before the storm hit, and concern gnawed at her. On the 9th day, as the skies finally cleared, she was helping Walter Jenkins unload supplies when a ranch hand from Blackwood property rode into town. Miss Sullivan, he called, dismounting with urgency. Mr. Blackwood sent me. The children, they've both taken ill. He asked if you might come. Maggie's heart clenched. How serious is it? Fever, coughing. The boy's worse than the girl. Mrs. Diaz is tending them, but... He hesitated. Mr. Blackwood hasn't slept in 3 days. Won't leave their sides. I'll come immediately, Maggie decided, turning to Walter. Can you arrange transportation? Within the hour, Maggie was in a sleigh heading toward the Blackwood Ranch, medical supplies from the town's doctor packed alongside her. The journey was difficult, the road nearly impassable in places. When they finally arrived, Owen himself came out, his face haggard with exhaustion and worry. Thank God you've come, he said, helping her from the sleigh. James's fever won't break, and Alice is getting worse. Inside, the usually welcoming home was hushed and tense. Mrs. Diaz met them in the hallway, her normally composed face drawn with fatigue. The doctor sent medicines, Maggie explained, unpacking the supplies, and instructions for their use. Over the next hours, Maggie worked alongside Mrs. Diaz, applying cool compresses to feverish foreheads, administering the doctor's remedies, and coaxing sips of water past parched lips. Owen moved between his niece and nephew's rooms, his presence constant but increasingly unsteady with exhaustion. Late that night, after forcing Owen to lie down on the sofa, Maggie sat with James, whose labored breathing filled the quiet room. She read to him softly, stories from the books Owen had purchased for the school, hoping her voice might provide comfort even in his delirium. Miss Sullivan, the weak voice startled her. James, you're awake. She set the book aside, touching his forehead. The fever had reduced significantly. How do you feel? Thirsty, he managed. After she helped him drink, he asked, Is Alice all right? She's fighting hard, just like you. Maggie smoothed his hair back. Your uncle has been very worried. Uncle Owen doesn't get scared of anything, James murmured, his eyes already closing again. Except losing us. The simple statement revealed more about Owen Blackwood than anything Maggie had yet learned. When James drifted back to sleep, his breathing easier now, she went to check on Alice. The girl's fever had also begun to recede. Relief washing through her, Maggie went to share the good news with Owen. She found him deeply asleep on the sofa, his large frame looking uncomfortable in the confined space. Unwilling to wake him, she gently covered him with a quilt. As she turned to leave, his hand caught hers. The children, he asked, instantly alert despite his exhaustion. The fevers are breaking. They're going to be fine, Owen. He closed his eyes briefly, emotion overwhelming him. When he looked at her again, the gratitude in his gaze was almost unbearable in its intensity. I don't know how to thank you for coming, he said, his voice rough. There's no need. Maggie sat beside him. I care about them too. It's more than that. Owen's grip on her hand tightened. When the messenger returned saying you were coming without hesitation. Maggie, do you know what that meant to me? The rawness of his question stripped away pretense. I would have come through worse than snow for you. For all of you. In the dimly lit room, with sleep-deprived honesty between them, Owen raised her hand to his lips. When Daniel died, I thought my family was broken beyond repair. But you, his voice caught. You've brought something back to us that I didn't realize was missing. The children recovered quickly, their resilience remarkable once the worst had passed. Maggie remained at the ranch for 3 days, sleeping in Alice's room while the girls shared with Mrs. Diaz. The time spent in the intimate family setting changed something fundamental in her relationship with Owen. There was an ease between them now, a shared understanding that went beyond words. On the morning of her departure, Owen drove her back to town himself. The day was bright, the snow-covered landscape glittering under a clear blue sky. The children extracted a promise that you'll come for Christmas, Owen said as they approached Whispering Creek. I hope that's acceptable. I'd like nothing more, Maggie replied, though it's only a week away. Too long, according to Alice. His smile was fond. She's already planning what she'll wear. At the boarding house, Owen helped her down from the sleigh, then surprised her by walking her to the door. Maggie, he began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with his thoughts. These past months, knowing you. Yes, she encouraged when he faltered. Owen shook his head in frustration. I told you I'm not good with words. Then perhaps actions? Maggie suggested softly. His eyes darkened. With careful deliberation, he removed his glove and touched her cheek, his fingers gentle against her skin. I'd like to court you properly, Maggie Sullivan, if you'd allow it. Joy bloomed within her. I would welcome it, Owen Blackwood. His smile transformed his tired face. Then I'll call on you tomorrow. With your permission. You have it, she assured him, her heart light with possibility. Christmas at the Blackwood Ranch was everything Maggie could have imagined. The house was decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons, the air fragrant with spices and wood smoke. Alice proudly showed off the new dress Mrs. Diaz had made for the occasion, while James demonstrated his recovered health by carrying in firewood without being asked. Owen had formally begun courting Maggie, calling at the boarding house twice weekly and escorting her to church on Sundays. The town watched their courtship with approving eyes, the respected rancher and their beloved schoolteacher forming a relationship that seemed destined from the start. After Christmas dinner, while the children played with their new gifts and Mrs. Diaz rested in her room, Owen invited Maggie to join him on the porch despite the cold. I have something for you, he said, producing a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. Owen, you've already given me too much, Maggie protested, thinking of the beautiful leather-bound copy of Tennyson's poems he had presented earlier. This is different. His expression was serious. Open it. Inside was a silver locket, delicately engraved with flowers. When she opened it, she found a tiny photograph of Alice and James on one side. The other side was empty. It's beautiful, she whispered. The empty side, Owen explained, is for whatever future you choose. Whoever you choose. The implication was clear. Maggie closed her hand around the locket. And if I've already chosen? Owen's breath caught. Slowly, he moved closer, his hands coming to rest lightly on her waist. Then I would be the happiest man in the Arizona territory. Their first kiss was gentle, a promise exchanged in the winter air, witnessed only by the distant mountains and the star-filled sky. Spring brought renewal to the land and to Maggie's life. Her courtship with Owen had blossomed through the winter months, deepening into a love that felt both extraordinary and inevitable. The children had embraced her place in their lives, Alice confiding her secrets and James seeking her help with difficult schoolwork. In April, as wildflowers carpeted the valleys and new calves strengthened the Blackwood herd, Owen asked Maggie to accompany him on a ride to his favorite spot on the property. They traveled on horseback, Maggie now comfortable in the saddle after months of Owen's patient instruction. He led her to a promontory overlooking a verdant valley, where a single oak tree provided shade. A small creek meandered below, its waters catching the sunlight. My father brought my mother here when he was courting her, Owen explained as they dismounted. Later, Daniel brought his wife. It's something of a Blackwood tradition. Maggie's heart quickened as Owen spread a blanket beneath the tree. They sat side by side, looking out over the land that had become as dear to Maggie as it clearly was to Owen. When I first came west, she said, I feared I'd made a terrible mistake. Everything was so different, so vast and untamed. And now? Owen asked, his eyes intent on her face. Now I can't imagine being anywhere else. She touched his hand. With anyone else. Owen took a deep breath. Maggie, I've been trying to find the perfect words for weeks. I've practiced speeches and rehearsed declarations, but none of them seemed right. He took her hands in his. I'm a simple man. All I can offer is my heart, my name, and my promise to spend every day trying to make you happy. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a gold band set with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. This was my mother's. I'd be honored if you'd wear it as my wife. Tears filled Maggie's eyes. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Owen. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands trembled slightly. Then he drew her close, kissing her with a depth of feeling that left her breathless. When they finally pulled apart, Owen rested his forehead against hers. You're what's been missing from my life, the cowboy said as he held her hand in his. From the moment you arrived in Whispering Creek, something changed. It was as if a piece of myself I never knew was absent suddenly fell into place. Maggie's heart swelled with emotion. I came west seeking purpose, but I found so much more. I found home. I found you. They were married in June, beneath the same oak tree where Owen had proposed. The entire town attended, the celebration continuing well into the night with dancing, feasting, and heartfelt toasts. Alice served as Maggie's maid of honor, wearing a new dress and a crown of wildflowers. James stood proudly beside his uncle, the ring-bearer's responsibility taken with utmost seriousness. Maggie continued teaching, riding to town each morning and returning to the ranch each afternoon. The school board initially questioned whether a married woman should remain in the position, but the town's parents, led by Walter Jenkins, made it clear that Mrs. Blackwood was precisely the teacher they wanted for their children. By the following spring, Maggie had news of her own to share. She told Owen one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in magnificent colors. A baby, he repeated, wonder filling his voice. Are you certain? Dr. Miller confirmed it yesterday, Maggie said, her hands instinctively covering her still flat stomach. He says the child will arrive in late November. Owen gathered her into his arms, his joy palpable. I never thought I'd have this, he confessed. After taking in Alice and James, I believe my family was complete. I never imagined finding you, having a child of our own. Are you happy? Maggie asked, though his radiant expression already answered her question. Beyond words, Owen replied, kissing her tenderly. Beyond measure. The news of the expected child spread quickly through Whispering Creek. Alice was ecstatic at the prospect of a cousin, while James adopted a protective stance toward his aunt, insisting on carrying her books and watching her climb stairs. Mrs. Diaz began knitting tiny garments, her usually stern face softening when she thought no one was looking. As Maggie's pregnancy progressed, she reluctantly agreed to take a leave of absence from teaching for the remainder of the year. The school board hired a temporary replacement, a young woman from Tucson, who looked at Whispering Creek with the same mixture of trepidation and determination Maggie had felt upon her own arrival. You've changed this town, Owen told Maggie one night as they lay together, his hand resting on the swell of her abdomen. Miss Peters is the third teacher since you came. Before you, we couldn't keep one for more than a few months. The town changed me too, Maggie replied. Gave me purpose, family, love. Speaking of family, Owen said, his tone deliberately casual, I received a letter from your aunt today. Maggie sat up in surprise. Aunt Beatrice wrote to you? Whatever for? Owen's expression was suspiciously innocent. I may have written to her first, inviting her to visit after the baby arrives. Owen Blackwood, Maggie exclaimed. You've been corresponding with my aunt behind my back. Only the once, he defended himself, grinning. She responded quite favorably. Says she's eager to meet the Western ruffian who stole her niece's heart. Despite her attempt at indignation, Maggie couldn't help laughing. Aunt Beatrice in Whispering Creek. I can hardly imagine it. She's your family, Owen said simply. That makes her ours. The baby arrived during the first snowfall of the year, a healthy boy with his father's stormy eyes and his mother's determined spirit. They named him Daniel, after the uncle he would never meet, but whose legacy lived on in the family that had expanded to include him. Aunt Beatrice arrived 2 weeks later, a formidable Boston matron whose initial shock at the rustic conditions quickly gave way to genuine affection for the Blackwood family. To everyone's surprise, she and Mrs. Diaz formed an immediate bond, exchanging recipes and child-rearing advice with equal authority. "Your young man is quite exceptional," Beatrice confided to Maggie as they sat beside the cradle where little Daniel slept. "Not at all the uncouth cowboy I feared. He's everything I never knew I wanted," Maggie replied, watching her son's peaceful slumber. "This life, it's nothing like what I imagined for myself, but it's perfect in its own way." Christmas that year was particularly special. The house overflowed with family: Owen, Maggie, the baby, Alice and James, Mrs. Diaz and Miguel, and Aunt Beatrice, who had extended her visit indefinitely. The gifts were modest but meaningful, the celebration warm with affection and gratitude. Late that night, after everyone else had retired, Owen found Maggie in the nursery, watching their son sleep. "Happy?" he asked softly, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Completely," she assured him, leaning back against his solid strength. "I was just thinking about that first day in Whispering Creek, how lost I felt. If someone had told me then that in less than 2 years I'd be here, married to you with our child, you'd have thought them mad," Owen finished, chuckling. "Utterly mad," she agreed. "Yet here we are." Owen turned her in his arms, his expression serious despite his smile. "I thank God every day that you were brave enough to come west, that you chose to stay, that you chose me." "As if there was ever any other choice," Maggie whispered, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "You're my heart, Owen Blackwood. You and our family, you're everything." The years passed, bringing changes both expected and surprising. Maggie returned to teaching part-time as Daniel grew, eventually establishing a high school program for Whispering Creek's older students. The town prospered as the railroad finally extended a spur line, bringing new settlers and opportunities. Alice grew into a poised young woman with a talent for numbers, eventually taking over the ranch's bookkeeping. James, tall and serious like his uncle, developed his father's love for the land, working alongside Owen to expand the Blackwood holdings. Little Daniel was joined by a sister, Margaret Rose, who inherited her mother's auburn hair and love of books. Aunt Beatrice never returned to Boston, declaring the western air beneficial to her health. She purchased the building next to the schoolhouse, establishing a proper library that became Whispering Creek's pride. Mrs. Diaz remained the heart of the Blackwood household, her stern affection extending to the growing family under her care. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Owen surprised Maggie with a trip to San Francisco, their first significant journey away from the ranch. They stayed in a grand hotel, attended the opera, and walked along the bay, marveling at the ships from distant ports. "Do you ever miss it?" Owen asked as they watched the bustling city from a hillside park. "Civilization, culture, all the things you left behind in Boston." Maggie considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I miss certain conveniences. Occasionally a concert or a new book that hasn't reached us yet." She turned to face him, taking in the face she had loved through a decade of joys and challenges. "But I've never regretted my choice, Owen. Not for a single day, even when I'm stubborn, when we argue about the children or the ranch. Especially then," she laughed, "because those arguments mean we're building something together, something real." That night in their hotel room, with moonlight streaming through unfamiliar windows, they loved each other with the passion of newlyweds and the deep understanding of partners who had weathered a decade together. Afterwards, as Maggie lay with her head on Owen's chest, listening to his steady heartbeat, she felt a profound contentment. "What are you thinking?" Owen asked, his fingers gently combing through her hair. "I'm thinking about that day by the creek, when you told me I was what had been missing from your life." She propped herself up to look into his eyes. "I didn't fully understand then what you meant, but I do now." "And what did I mean, Mrs. Blackwood?" His smile was tender in the dim light. "That sometimes we don't recognize the empty spaces in our hearts until someone comes along who fits them perfectly." She traced his jawline with her fingertip. "You're what was missing from my life too, Owen. You and the children and the ranch and even Whispering Creek itself. All of it together made me whole in a way I never knew I needed." When they returned home, life resumed its familiar pattern: ranch work, school lessons, family meals, and the seasonal rhythms that defined their existence. But something had shifted subtly, a deeper appreciation for the life they had built together from such unlikely beginnings. One summer evening 15 years after Maggie's arrival in Whispering Creek, the extended Blackwood family gathered on the ranch house porch. Alice, now 23 and engaged to a young doctor from Tucson, sat with her fiancé. James, 25 and recently returned from agricultural studies in California, discussed breeding techniques with Owen. Daniel, 14 and lanky, read aloud to his 10-year-old sister and Mrs. Diaz, while Aunt Beatrice supervised the entire scene with benevolent authority. Maggie watched them all, her heart full. Owen caught her eye across the porch and excused himself from James, coming to sit beside her on the swing. "You have that look," he observed, taking her hand. "What look is that?" "The one that says you're counting blessings." His fingers intertwined with hers, the familiar calluses a comfort against her skin. "There are too many to count," Maggie admitted. "Do you remember what Walter Jenkins told me that first day? That in Whispering Creek, a whisper at dawn is shouted from rooftops by noon." Owen laughed. "Some things never change." "I'm glad." She leaned against his shoulder. "I wouldn't change a thing about our life, Owen. Not one moment." As twilight deepened into night, stars appearing in the velvet sky above the ranch, Owen's arm tightened around Maggie. The children's voices, Mrs. Diaz's laughter, the distant lowing of cattle, these were the sounds of home, of a life richly lived. "You're still what completes me," Owen whispered against her hair. "After all these years." "And you're still my cowboy," Maggie replied, her voice filled with the abiding love that had carried them from those first uncertain encounters to this moment of perfect belonging. "My heart, my home." Under the vast western sky, surrounded by the family they had built together, Owen and Maggie Blackwood continued writing their story, a tale of love that had bridged different worlds and found its true home in the wild heart of the Arizona Territory.